everyone. Welcome to our next info series on carbon credits and the carbon market. We will start with today's topic in any second now. We'll just give more time for the stream to go live properly and for people to dial in and join. If you're new to this, we'll talk around 10 to 15 minutes about a current topic. And if you have any questions, there's a chat, but you can also suggest new topics for our next round. So feel free to drop something in the comments or in the chat, and we'll make sure to talk about your topic next time around. I'll start with a quick introduction. So my name is Thorsten. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Freeze Carbon. At Freeze Carbon, we help companies get access to high quality carbon projects in the market and procure carbon credits to ensure they reach their climate targets and commit to climate action around the world. We do this in the voluntary market, and the entire session will be also focusing on the voluntary market only. And maybe if you're very new to the topic, a carbon credit or a carbon project helps to remove CO2 from the atmosphere or avoid that there's new CO2 added to the atmosphere. And the units this is discussed in is a carbon credit and one carbon credit. So with 1 ton of CO2 or a CO2 equivalent. Perfect. Then we'll get started with today's topic, and we'll talk around when should I get started buying carbon credits? When should I get into this market? Is now the time for me as a company, or is there another time? And we'll split the session in 2 areas. First, we'll go into a bit of background. How can I access the carbon market? And then second, we'll discuss a few case studies, discussing which company should start getting into the market right now or at a later point. But let's start with how can you access the market? There's 2 ways to buy carbon credits. You can either buy them spot. So you can buy a carbon credit on the spot right now. That means the credit has already been created or certified, and the money exchange is today and the credit exchange is today as well. This is especially helpful if you procure credits for retrospective emissions of the past year, let's say 2023, for example, and you go into the market right away. The details of accessing the spot market is that you are accessing the market at one point in time, and you get one price point at that point for these carbon credits. There's a second way to access the market is in a future approach. That means you secure future delivery of carbon credits. This approach is in 2 ways. It's either you say, I want to have carbon credits for a specific year in the future, let's say 2026, or you can access the market and say 2026 onwards for 3, 5, or 10 years, I want to have carbon credits for my strategy, and I'm accessing the market via a multi-year contract over time. So single year, multi-year. What is the benefit of accessing the market already now for future delivery or a multi-year contract? Is of course extremely discounted values compared to the spot market. What we see typical discounts are between 30 to 60% compared to the spot market. And we of course see even higher discounts depending on if you're taking a 10-year contract over the longer time, or if you're securing a very large volume from the projects. There we have seen like really, really large discounts because the project can then budget much better. They have the commitment of a company coming in and helping them scale up as well. Especially on the future side, questions we get a lot around payment structures. There's 2 types of payment structures. There's you pay everything up front, or you have a mix of paying some part of upfront, like a small percentage today, and then the large part on delivery in that year, let's say 2026, when the credits are exchanged for money. One other really important element around carbon credits is that they do not expire. So if you buy a carbon credit or if you commit to buy a carbon credit in the future, this carbon credit can be used also half a year later, 2 years later. That means if you're buying a 2025 carbon credit, you can use it for your 2026 balance or your retirement program. So that's very important. The carbon credit doesn't expire, so to say. There are some guidelines by different certification companies. They say, please use recent credits. Sometimes it's not really defined, or in other cases, they define and say, should not be older than 5 years. But this is really a case-to-case situation where we need to check how this certification company that certifies you is handling this. One other aspect that's really important, if you're using carbon credits for carbon neutrality or net zero, the argument of double counting is extremely important. So that means that you cannot use a carbon credit that has been accounted already by someone else, another government or another country, another company. So double counting needs to be avoided 100% of the time. In this space of no double counting, there are currently very limited carbon credits in the market on the spot and near term, let's say the next 2 or 3 years available. So this is something to bear in mind, that if you have a specific climate goal, let's say carbon neutral, net zero, and so on, that you're not looking at the whole market, but you're looking at some part of the market of carbon credits that can help you fulfill that solution or fulfill that climate goal. I'll quickly check if there's any questions. Please drop them in the chat. But otherwise, I would go on and discuss which company should get into the market at which point of time. So let's check. We'll rank it and go with, so to say, the company that should go into the market or can afford to go into the market at a later point in time. The last company that typically we see is currently not yet active are companies with very small emissions and very late or no climate targets at all. So they're not afraid of the market being sold out. They don't have a real commitment yet. They're very, very early stage to learn about this topic, and they don't have a near-term target. They say, I want to be net zero in 2040, 2045, or something like that. These companies are not really rushing into the market right now, but they're just learning about the market on a monthly and quarterly basis. More urgent case is if the company has very large emissions and has a medium-term climate goal, let's say 2035, 2040, something like that. The point around having large emissions, changing the timing, is that the availability in the market is not that high. That if every company, especially the large ones, wait until the last moment, that the market will be sold out and therefore pricing will rise very quickly. So if you have large emissions and a medium-term goal, let's say 2035, you can access the market right now to start building your 2035 puzzle piece one by one, and then over the next years start filling up that 2035 commitment. The example for this one is if you say I have 100,000 tons that I estimate in 2035 of emissions, that you start today procuring the first 10, then over the next years, the next 10, the next 10, and the next 10. So you build up your puzzle one by one until you reach the year, and you don't have to buy everything in one go. This helps you a lot to learn about the market, the process to procure carbon credits. It averages out your cost and it spreads out the financial burden. I can imagine that CFOs, of course, want to ensure that budget is allocated wisely. And with this strategy, you're building up your portfolio over time instead of having one big cost block from the get-go in a later year. The next more urgent situation is if a company has a near-term carbon neutrality or net zero target. So let's say 2030 or even earlier. These companies, they need to start getting into the market ASAP because the target is very close by, and the year 2030 is actually picked by quite a few companies to reach net zero. If everyone waits until 2029, we'll see a lot of people rushing into the market, and again, prices will rise quite fast. So for these companies, the same strategy upholds. You can start filling up your puzzle piece and say, if I have 100,000 tons of emissions I estimate to have in 2030 left over, I start building that puzzle and procuring the first 10, then the next 10, and so on over the next couple of months to make sure when I reach 2030, I have everything that I need. And keep in mind, carbon credits do not expire. That means if you bought a few too many in a given year, you can use them in the following years. The next one, and even more urgent, and these are the companies that are actively in the market right now already, is if you're offering a climate neutral product or service, especially in the B2B world. That means you're building a machine, you reduce all the emissions that you could already using green energy and so on, but you have certain emissions, let's say steel, for example, that steel production that you still have, and you want to offer that machine as a climate neutral or carbon neutral machine to your buyer, you can use carbon credits to neutralize the residual emissions. These companies are right now actively in the market. And the strategy behind this is, for example, if I want to differentiate my offering from competitors, so I'm offering a carbon neutral machine, or if it actually has been requested by a large customer that I become carbon neutral, and I have to oblige to ensure I remain a tier 1 or A-listed supplier to that company. And then last one, this is another group that is actively in the market today, all companies that want to contribute to climate action in general. This is especially true if you say climate needs to be protected as much as possible. I don't have the perfect strategy yet. I don't have the perfect and final numbers, but I want to be active and support that market and the scale up of that market. I'm in the market with a contribution claim, meaning I put a euro value for the strategy, let's say 100,000 euros or €1,000,000, whatever fits the size of your companies, and dedicate that to climate projects. In this case, I'm not communicating that I'm matching ton for ton, but I'm communicating that I'm investing in climate projects around the world, also at home, of course, to support global climate action. This is the last strategy, and these companies are actively in the market today already. These are the cases I wanted to go through. They were ranked by urgency. So least urgency is currently very small companies, small emissions, no target at all, or very long-term target. Next, more urgent is large companies with large emissions, medium-term target, let's say 2035. Start building that puzzle piece, that puzzle together with your estimated emissions for that target year. The next more urgent ones is medium companies that have a 2030 target or even closer target to reach climate neutrality or net zero. And then currently in the market, very active companies that offer climate neutral products or net zero are net zero already today. I'll give some time to add comments or questions in the chat if you have any. Please feel free to drop them there, and I can answer them as well for you. Maybe whilst people drop a question, our next topic will be on one of the carbon credit project types. We'll discuss the current, I would say, spotlight project type, which is biochar, which is a carbon removal project type, storing CO2 for 100 years and over 1,000 years, depending on the production process and certification behind it. So currently quite hot topic in the market. If there are no questions, we would conclude today's info series or info session. I look forward to our next one. We'll be off for a few weeks because we are at different trade shows, but make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and we'll notify you around the next session. Perfect. Thank you very much and have a nice